Example 2, our daughter requests permission to borrow the car to attend a party, asserts that the party is at a specific friend's place. She promises that to come back at a specific time and offers to fill up the gas tank. We assess the situation and grant her request, and she declares her gratitude with a thank you. So remember how, like when you read this without knowing those building blocks, you think that you may confuse sometimes assertions and assessments. This is going to help us when we begin to do some exercises. So in the afternoon. But first of all, this is what you need to know about how different cultures communicate. And here we are going to talk about the two ends of the continuum with the understanding that certain cultures might fall at the end of each of those two, independent, interdependence, and some may fall somewhere in the middle. What we are concerned about the most is the big distance, is when there is a big distance between them. And the distance always exists between the interdependent on one end and the independent on one end. Okay. So, two styles of communications, explicit communications. What you would begin to see is that if your culture creates an independent self, it likes to also have explicit communication. Why? Because people are independent, individual, separate, equal. They have to assert themselves because that's how you are considered to be a person of worth, when you can influence and assert who you are. So your communication has to be explicit. That's what you raise children in a school system to speak up for themselves, to assert themselves, to be assertive. Words tend to be the primary means of communication, but here is the distinguishing factor. Responsibility for the meaning is with the speaker. So if there's a miscommunication, oh, I'm sorry, I miscommunicated. Let me go back and work on my communication skills. You have to work on your communication skills. So it's the person who is speaking who usually they're at fault if the meaning is not correct. Usually. And then we send people to, well, you really need to take a training on communication skills and so on. Meanwhile, in interdependent culture, interdependence says, actually, the responsibility for the meaning is with the listener. Why? Because to maintain harmony and maintain relationships, there may come a time when I need to say something uncomfortable, and I'm gonna do it in a way where the primary focus is going to be to preserve the relationship and save face. And I'm going to learn how to develop a sophisticated way of communicating that when I need to communicate something uncomfortable, the other person will read between the lines and will follow the breadcrumbs. And then we will arrive at a meaning that what I'm trying to say, they get it, they understand, there is a problem. I'll just give you a simple example. So say, for example, my sister, say, for example, I want to go to the airport, and I need a ride to the airport next week. So when I'm talking to my sister, I may say to her, hey, I'm going to go to Phoenix next week. So at this moment, she knows that I need to fly. Her job now is to say the next appropriate move, to make the next appropriate move, which is, hey, do you have a ride? And then I say, no. And she's like, do you want a ride? I can drive you. And that's what I'm expecting from her. But if I say that and she says, oh, how much, that would be fun. I've never been to Phoenix. Let me know how you find it. I'm going to go, hey, wait a minute. Where is the right thing to say? You're supposed to offer. Even if I don't need it, I need to hear an offer. Because that's what you do in a relationship. I may not take up upon it. I may have already something, but you saying you're not making the right move here. So you see how, like for example, maybe I'll begin to read her mind. Remember that I'll start beginning to write, okay, well, if she doesn't offer, then it must be that, there must be something going on with her and her husband or children. So I'm going to say, okay, well, if she did not offer, this means she doesn't want to, or she can't. Either case, my brain now is wondering, what's going on with my sister? This is the third time this happens, and I'm going to look at history long term. I'm going to see patterns. I'm going to begin my pattern recognition. Is this something new, or is this? So you see how I'm going to be questioning the relationship. What's going on? So that's kind of where I want her to offer, but I don't want to embarrass her because what if she can't do it? Now she's gonna feel bad. So you see what I'm saying? That's how implicit communication, and it happens in two different dimensions. One, when the context of a relationship that needs to be preserved and needs to be maintained. It's also in the hierarchy, when there is hierarchy, and when there is discomfort. Something is discomfort. Some discomfort is or uncomfortable. Something that is sensitive. People will resort to this. But when that's not the case, people are very communicative and very emotional, and they'll tell you how they feel. But that's when we are having a party or when having a happy hour, whatever. But as soon as the subject turns into something that could be discomfort, these rules apply. Does it make sense? Yes, Dennis.
So this is verbal oral communication.
Yes.
And I rely, because of my extremely bad hearing, I pick up a lot on body communication.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you now, is that why you see a lot of ones from other countries are more expressionate with their bodies?
Yes. There's a lot of communication happens with the body where people smile. And smiling is not just to express pleasure, or but there's a certain smiles that if you are in that culture, you will begin to detect what kind of smile. And that will give you a hint that, oops, something is going on here. I need to probe further. And, so people will probe further. Body language is very important. How people will react when they are talking about something discomfort, how they may change, and that may betray their appearance of calm. But people in these cultures, they grew up. Remember neuroplasticity? They grew up with parents and family members and cousins, and they understand those cues, those implicit cues. If you grew up in this culture, you don't need any of that. Why? Because you expect people to communicate what they're feeling, and if they don't, it's because those feelings do not exist. Otherwise, why would they not? You know what I mean? So that the two different systems of thought. Okay. So there's sometimes this question about the degrees of directness, because every culture has their own way of what directness means. But the question is what happens when they are communicating with people from a different culture. So if you are from an implicit culture talking to someone from an explicit type of culture like interdependence, when you are being indirect, you really are not even registering on their radar. Whatever you're talking about, if you are being indirect, this doesn't even register on their radar if they are expecting explicit communication. When you think you are direct, which means like, I'm going to be very direct with them, you still are could be indirect. If you think you're blunt, maybe at that point, now they'll go, whoa, he's really upset about this. He's really feeling very strongly about this. Yeah, it's because you had to go all the way blunt. In your own culture, you think that was blunt. In this culture, no. You just pass the threshold of where it qualifies as being direct. And then the opposite. When you are from an explicit culture, working with somebody from an implicit, even when you think you are indirect, it could be that you registered for them as direct. Even when you say, okay, I'm trying to give them a hint, I'm going to try to tell them that their work really is not within, but I'm going to make it kind of, I'm going to try to put it in a good, I'm going to give them something positive. I'll do the sandwich thing. I'll give them something positive, and then I'll give them something negative, and then I'll give them something positive. But you think that that's being indirect. Well, they're registered as very direct. When you think you are direct, then you are potentially very blunt. They may conceive it as very blunt. And when you are blunt, then that reaches the threshold potentially of rudeness. Yes, go ahead. So just, if I may, just one thing. So the point from this whole slide is that what you think is direct, it's relative, or what you think is indirect, it's relative. And I know that's confusing, but I just want you to believe that the more that the more subtle you could be about negative feedback, and we'll get to those exercises this afternoon, the better, because you need to work hard. You need to work hard at making sure you don't come across as too strong when you are delivering negative feedback. Because if you are independent, explicit, that's okay in your culture. That's okay in that culture, to be direct, to be explicit, to be straightforward. That just doesn't translate very well to other cultures. Okay? So just kind of remember this. This doesn't solve anything. This doesn't give you actual clues. But it just changes your mind about what you consider to be indirect is actually, could be actually very, very direct, especially negative feedback. Any questions or reactions?
Yeah.
Yes. No, you were smiling, so that's why I point to you. Tell me, what are you smiling?
I was just thinking about how within our just in our internal groups within the school district that we work with, there is a lot of this happening
Mhm.
within the departments.
Yeah.
And we're all under the same umbrella. Right?
Yeah.
And so we've got actually a group huddle with one of the other departments in a couple of weeks, and I was tasked with a icebreaker.
Mm.
So I was smiling because I'm gonna figure out a way to incorporate this into our icebreaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Is this helpful, by the way? Is this helpful to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking just within the cultures of the United States.
Yeah.
I had a project where it was just outside New York City, so I had an large percentage of the team is from the New York area, and having come from the West Coast, I wasn't used to that,
Yeah.
and I was dealing with I had one guy in particular on the project who was really good developer. He was very good, but he was so arrogant.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until
Very blunt.
Yeah, very blunt.
Border between these
And
two,
as a
right?
project manager, I was trying to get him to follow my lead, right? And it wasn't until I kind of got fed up and I got right in his face and I was very blunt, and everything was perfect after that.
Yeah.
It was like finally